You may not believe it, but it's possible that Venezuela will invade Guyana in a couple of months after this video is released. Let me tell you more about a possible war between the two countries. What would the consequences be and how would that affect the world? This scenario is quite possible to happen, and we can watch it unfold before our eyes in a few months, so I hope that I'm wrong here. The situation between Venezuela and Guyana is reaching a boiling point. They have a 124-year-long ongoing border dispute, where Venezuela claims 2/3 of Guyana. What happened there and why is Venezuela maybe going to invade? The region in question is called Essequibo, which runs along the Essequibo River, splitting Guyana in two. The area is about the same size as my home country of Bulgaria. Not many people live there, in Guyana I mean. There are still some people living in Bulgaria for some reason. Only 125,000 people live in the Essequibo province, out of the 800,000 residents of Guyana. While the region accounts for 2/3 of the territory, it's only 1/6 of the population, meaning that it's quite underdeveloped. The reason for it being underdeveloped is simple. Guyana doesn't want to develop it on purpose. The government of Guyana knows that Venezuela claims these lands, so they choose not to develop them. This would make a possible Venezuelan invasion quite difficult, since they would need to pass through underdeveloped jungles. This has deterred Venezuela from invading in the past 50 years or so. It's just that an invasion would be too costly, with a naval invasion of the capital, Georgetown, being too costly as well. In 1814, the Netherlands gave their colony of Guyana to the United Kingdom. The story on how this happened is complicated and it doesn't matter for this video, so I'll not waste your time. What is more important is that the treaty didn't defy a western border. This is why Britain sent one explorer to the ground to officially create a border. The explorer came up with the Strombunk line, which is the border between Venezuela and Guyana up until today. The problem is that the line claimed an area the size of Switzerland too much, which of course was given to Britain. Venezuela disputed this immediately and claimed that the actual border is based on the Essequibo River. This was de facto Venezuela claiming 2/3 of the British colony. Then gold was discovered in the disputed area, which raised the stakes even more. War was looking likely, but the United States stepped in to stop the conflict. The Freedom Nation forced the United Kingdom to accept an arbitration of the dispute. In 1899 it was decided that the United Kingdom is right with their claims and Venezuela is wrong. Ah yes, classic Britain stealing lands. How did this border dispute escalate? In 1962, Venezuela stopped agreeing to respect the 1899 treaty. Just 4 years later, Guyana gained their independence from the British. This means that the dispute is no longer between Venezuela and the United Kingdom, but with Venezuela and smaller, weaker and newly independent Guyana. One word: oil. Located underneath the seabed, it has discovered that Guyana has quite a lot of oil. While neighboring Venezuela is among the top oil producers, they always want access to more. Guyana's oil is still untapped into, because the country is too poor to invest into such infrastructure. Venezuela claimed that Guyana doesn't have the right to explore oil reserves in the disputed province. In September of 2023, Venezuela's National Assembly will release a multi-question referendum regarding the status of Essequibo. The referendum will be made to the public on the 3rd of December, which is the exact date of this video getting published. What is so special about the referendum, you may ask? Well, let's look at the questions, which clearly shows that Venezuela is going to do something in the region soon. First question is if Venezuela's public rejects the 1899 treaty. The government has already rejected it ever since 1962, so the question doesn't really matter. The most important question is the fifth and final one. There, Venezuela's public is asked whether they agree with integrating Essequibo as a Venezuelan state. Also, citizenship and identity cards will be granted to the population of Essequibo. The region will also be incorporated into the country's map. This is the first step towards the annexation of the region. We all know that Venezuela's elections aren't always fair and democratic. We can assume that the fifth proposal would gain a majority, whether the Venezuelans agree with it or not. Guyana has expressed their concerns for the referendum, saying that it's an existential threat to them. But even if Venezuela's referendum turns out in favor of annexation, this wouldn't change anything right away. The question is what Venezuela would do, especially if many people voted yes to annexing Essequibo. Guyana has reported several hundred Venezuelan soldiers were deployed near the border. Venezuela claims that these soldiers are there to combat illegal mining operations. Well, at least it wasn't an army exercise near another sovereign country, right? Just so you know, these are the videos I'm working on right now, so consider subscribing if you don't want to miss any of them out. Now, back to the video. It's difficult to say for certain, but war is looking likely. For sure, the Venezuelan government would trick the votes in favor of drawing Essequibo as part of Venezuela on official maps and etc. This would mean that Venezuelan soldiers can go there, since in the eyes of Venezuela, they're just moving in their own country. This would spark global outrage, but there isn't a lot the world could do. Venezuela is already heavily sanctioned and they are allied with countries like China, Russia and North Korea. I would assume that Venezuela would start their own special military operation. The first step would be for Venezuela to go into the Essequibo province and grant citizenship and ID cards to residents there. This would allow these people to vote for the presidential elections, which are scheduled for the second half of 2024, quite close to now. I assume that this would create several problems, with the military being sent in to pacify the region. This would be considered as an act of aggression, but there isn't a lot that could be done. No global power is willing to go to war directly against Venezuela. They would prefer to send their support to Guyana and choose #PrayForGuyana. This means that your Uber icon is going to look like this. All jokes aside, this would be terrible news for world stability. In just 3 years, Russia has invaded Ukraine, Palestine and Israel are back at it, Afghanistan has fallen, and there are civil wars in many places around the world. West Africa is slowly falling into dictatorships, so the world is slowly becoming more hostile. Since Venezuela has oil, wouldn't the United States invade so they can secure freedom for Venezuela, but also steal all of their oil in the process? Well, there is a presidential election scheduled for November 4th, 2024. This would come a couple of months after Venezuela has invaded Guyana, according to my assumptions. Perhaps some candidate like Donald Trump would claim that the United States needs to get involved in this war to protect innocent lives, by killing even more innocent lives. The United States intervening is a possibility, but I'll not explore it in this scenario, since it cannot be said for certain. Also, the outcome of the war would be very clear if the United States gets involved. The country of Suriname also claims a small part of Guyana. Depending on how sanctions go on Venezuela and the support that Guyana receives, Suriname could also invade their respective claims. As you can imagine, Guyana wouldn't be able to defend itself against Venezuela. This is why I didn't explore the war scenario too much. The borders between the two countries is a dense rainforest, so it would be difficult for troops to move quickly. With time and many casualties, Venezuela would secure their claims. Guerrilla warfare would be established, with rebels hiding in remote places, destroying Venezuelan supply lines and picking soldiers one by one. Besides the two countries, how would this war affect the world? I think it's very important to discuss that even more than the actual war itself. The simple reason for that is, according to how the world replies, other nations could think of a possible expansion. For example, if the world doesn't punish Venezuela and just protests the invasion online, then I bet Serbia would think of invading Kosovo, since the West would just spam the internet with hashtags. Tensions between North and South Korea are also rising, but I doubt anything serious would come out of that region, at least not right now. Speaking of the region, China invading Taiwan is also a possibility, but I very much doubt that would happen. For sure, the world is going to become more unstable, with maybe another conflict sparking in the near future. Ethiopia invading Eritrea is another possible war that could occur. This is because Ethiopia is landlocked and they desperately need access to the sea and global trade. Eritrea used to be part of Ethiopia up until 1993, when they declared their independence and fought a war over it. Ethiopia became landlocked and is now dependent on some of their neighboring countries, like Djibouti, from which 80% of Ethiopia's trade comes from. There is also the Tigray province, which is very disputed between Ethiopia and Eritrea, so this war is a real possibility. While we're in Africa, I would say that the dictatorships in West Africa would increase in number, where a possible war could erupt. Mali and the Tuareg people are in a civil war, which could very much escalate. The world has become increasingly more tense ever since Afghanistan fell to the Taliban. Russia has attacked Ukraine, stuff in Israel is happening, and now maybe Venezuela and Guyana will be at war. This is the domino effect at its finest. I assume that the possible war between Venezuela and Guyana is the deciding factor if we can stop the domino effect or more countries would go to war, starting World War III. I did predict that Venezuela would invade Guyana in my alternate world future video I made. You can give it a watch if you want to learn more. Also, World War III happened. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.